A healthy queen bee can lay more than 2,000 eggs in a single day. That is one egg every 43 seconds. While you are pouring coffee, she lays one. While you are opening the back door to your garden, she lays another. While a bee lands on your lavender and lowers her head into the flower, another life is being placed into a wax cell in the dark. And still, the queen is not in charge. She does not choose which flowers the workers visit. She does not decide whether your garden is worth the flight. She does not tell a bee to land on your rosemary, or leave your clover alone, or return tomorrow morning. She does not lead the swarm. She does not inspect the nest site. She does not even choose the cell where most of her eggs will go. The animal we call the queen is surrounded all day by workers who feed her, clean her, smell her, guide her, measure her, and, if the signal coming from her body begins to fail, quietly begin making her replacement. That is the part most people get wrong. The bees in your garden have a queen, but the reason they are in your garden is almost certainly not because she sent them there. The bee on your flowers was born from her body, but her route, her work, her timing, her death, and even the future of the queen herself are controlled by something larger than any one bee. So what is the queen actually doing in there? If that question changes how you picture the hive behind every bee in your garden, subscribe. New video every week. Stay until the end, because the strangest part is that the colony protects the queen completely while also holding the right to replace her at any moment. Most people hear the word queen and imagine command. It is hard not to. A queen sounds like the center of authority, the one who decides, the one who issues instructions. If a hive has a queen, then the queen must be the reason the hive behaves as one body. When the workers leave, she directs them. When they return, they report to her. When bees arrive in your garden, somewhere inside the hive, the queen has chosen your flowers. That image is simple. It is also almost completely wrong. A honeybee colony is not a kingdom in the human sense. It is not a palace with orders moving outward from a throne. It is closer to a living network in which thousands of female workers respond to smell, temperature, hunger, space, vibration, and each other. The queen sits near the center of that network, but center does not mean commander. A heart is central to a body. It does not decide where the feet walk. Have you ever watched a bee working a flower and wondered where the decision came from? Why that flower, in that corner of the garden, at that exact minute? Not from the queen. The decision came from foragers, scouts, dancers, followers, and the immediate needs of the colony. If your lavender is producing more nectar than the flowers 2 streets away, returning bees dance longer for it. Other bees follow the dance. They fly the route. They test the source. If it is worth it, more bees come. If it is not, the dance fades. The queen does not hear the debate. She does not approve the route. She may never know your garden exists. And yet every one of those workers began as an egg she laid. That is the contradiction at the center of the hive. The queen is not the mind of the colony. She is the colony's future being produced one cell at a time. Inside the hive, the queen moves across the comb with a small court of workers around her. Beekeepers call this her retinue. The word sounds ceremonial, and from the outside, it can look ceremonial. Workers facing her, touching her with their antennae, licking her body, offering food, clearing space. If you saw it without context, you might think they were serving a monarch. They are not just serving her, they are reading her. The queen's body produces a complex chemical signature, often called queen pheromone, that tells the colony she is alive, fertile, and present. This signal is not broadcast like a sound. It moves by contact. Workers touch her, lick the compounds from her body, pass them to other workers, and carry the information through the hive in a living relay. Think about what that means for the bee in your garden. The forager on your flowers does not need to meet the queen today. She may never touch her again. But the state of the queen is still moving through the colony as a chemical fact. The workers inside the hive know whether the queen is present. They know whether her signal is strong. They know whether the future of the colony is stable enough to keep raising workers like the one now standing on your lavender. The queen does not command them with that signal. She informs them, and there is a difference. A command says, "Do this." A signal says, "This is the state of the system." The workers decide what to do with it. This is where the queen's life becomes stranger than the title suggests. She is the only fully reproductive female in a normal honeybee colony. During her early adult life, she leaves the hive for mating flights, mates with multiple drones, and stores their sperm in a small internal organ called the spermatheca. That stored sperm can remain viable for years. After that, most of her life is spent in darkness, walking the comb, placing eggs into cells, and being constantly managed by workers. She can choose whether to release sperm as an egg passes through her body. A fertilized egg becomes female, a worker, or, under different feeding and cell conditions, a queen. An unfertilized egg becomes male, a drone. That sounds like enormous power until you look at the comb around her. The queen lays where there is a cell ready, and the workers decide which cells are ready. They build the comb. They clean the cells. They polish them. They feed the larvae after the eggs hatch. They control the temperature of the brood nest. They decide when to raise ordinary workers and when to build the large vertical cells that can produce new queens. The queen supplies eggs, but the workers create the conditions that tell the colony what those eggs will become. You would expect the queen to be the architect of the next generation. She is not. She is the source material moving through an architecture built by others. In the 1950s and 60s, researchers studying honeybee colonies began to understand how much of this organization depends on chemical communication rather than royal authority. Colin Butler's work on what was then called queen substance helped show that compounds produced by the queen could affect worker behavior, queen rearing, swarming, and the colony's sense of queen presence. Later work identified queen mandibular pheromone and other retinue pheromone components as part of a larger chemical vocabulary. But here is the point that matters for your garden. Pheromone is not a speech. It does not say, "Send 20 bees to the roses." It does not say, "Stop visiting the clover." It does not say, "Replace the old foragers near the fence." It tells the colony something more basic. She is here. She is fertile. The reproductive center is functioning. From that information, the workers maintain order. They continue feeding larvae. They continue foraging. They continue regulating temperature. They continue deciding whether the colony should expand, swarm, or prepare for replacement. The queen's chemical presence stabilizes the colony, but stability is not the same as leadership. A thermostat can change the behavior of a house. That does not make it the owner. Once you see the queen this way, the bee in your garden becomes part of a larger and more unsettling picture. The worker on your flower is a daughter of the queen, but she is not obedient to the queen in the way people imagine. She is obedient to the needs of the colony. If the colony needs nectar, she flies. If the dance inside the hive says your garden is worth the distance, she goes there. If a better source appears tomorrow, she may disappear without ceremony. The queen did not choose your garden. The garden was selected by the workers. This is exactly why the title queen misleads us. The queen is essential, but she is not sovereign. Without her, the colony has no normal future. Without workers, she cannot feed herself properly, cannot keep brood warm, cannot build comb, cannot defend the entrance, cannot forage, cannot decide where to move, and cannot survive as anything more than an isolated insect. A queen alone is not a hive. A hive is the workers, plus the queen, plus the information moving between them. And the workers are not passive subjects. They monitor her constantly. If her pheromone signal changes, if her egg-laying drops, if her body is injured, if her stored sperm begins to fail and more unfertilized eggs appear, the colony does not wait for permission. Workers begin the process of supersedure, replacing the queen while the colony is still functioning. This is one of the most quietly brutal facts in the hive. The replacement does not begin with rebellion in the dramatic sense. There is no attack at first, no announcement. The workers start building queen cells. They choose young female larvae and feed them differently, heavily, continuously, with the rich food that can turn an ordinary female larva into a future queen. The old queen may continue walking the comb while the colony is already raising the body that will replace her. Have you ever thought about what it means for an animal to be cared for completely and judged completely at the same time? That is the queen's life. She is fed because she matters. She is groomed because she matters. She is protected because she matters. She is replaced because the colony matters more. The hive does not have loyalty in the human way, it has continuity. If one queen can no longer hold the future together, the workers make another. Not because they hate her, because honeybee survival was built around a rule older than any hive you will ever see. The individual is temporary. The colony must pass through time. At peak season, she can lay a mass of eggs that approaches or exceeds her own body weight in a day. The workers feed her so this can happen. She is not going out to gather food. She is not tasting the nectar that comes from your flowers. She is converting the labor of thousands of daughters into the next thousands of daughters. A bee leaves your garden carrying nectar. Inside the hive, that nectar enters the economy of the colony. Some becomes honey. Some becomes fuel. Some supports the queen as she keeps laying. Your flowers do not just feed the bee you see. They may help feed the body that makes the bees you will see weeks from now. Right now, while you are watching this, if there is a strong colony within flying distance of your home, its queen may be moving across a dark sheet of comb surrounded by attendants. She pauses at a cell. Workers have cleaned it. She lowers her abdomen. An egg is placed. She moves on. Around her, workers touch her, feed her, redirect her, carry her signal outward, and keep the machine from slowing down. It looks like royalty only if you ignore the machinery. The real power of the hive is distributed. It is in the workers that decide which flowers are worth visiting. It is in the bees that fan the entrance when the temperature rises. It is in the nurses that choose how larvae are fed. It is in the guards that evaluate threats. It is in the scouts that dance for a new home. It is in the quiet fact that no one bee understands the whole system, but the system keeps producing answers. That should feel familiar and alien at the same time. We like stories with a person at the center, one leader, one decision maker, one explanation. Bees refuse to give us that. The queen is the easiest character to name, so we give her the story. But the hive is really thousands of small rules, repeated until they become a civilization. The queen matters because she is the reproductive bottleneck through which the future passes. The workers matter because they decide whether that future survives long enough to fly. And somewhere between those two facts is the bee in your garden. She is not a citizen receiving orders from a monarch. She is not a tiny machine directed from the dark. She is a temporary worker in a colony that gave her 6 weeks, maybe less, to complete tasks she did not invent, but performs with astonishing precision. She will not know that the egg she began as was one of thousands laid in a single day. She will not know your name, or why you stopped to watch her. But she came because the colony found value there. Before she arrived, some bee had to discover that patch of flowers. Some bee had to return. Some bee had to dance. Other bees had to believe the dance enough to check it. The colony had to decide that the flight was worth the cost. And behind all of that, in the dark, a queen who does not rule anything had laid the egg that made this worker possible. That is the strange balance. The queen did not send her. Without the queen, she would not exist. I think this is why the queen bee myth lasts. It is not completely wrong in the way simple falsehoods are wrong. It is wrong because it mistakes importance for control. The queen is important beyond exaggeration. Her fertility shapes the future. Her failure can trigger replacement. Her death can throw the hive into emergency. But importance is not the same as command, and being necessary is not the same as being in charge. The bee on your lavender this morning belongs to a society that figured that out millions of years before we gave it a royal title. It built a system where the most protected individual is also monitored, where the most famous bee has almost no executive power, where the mother of the colony is kept alive by daughters who can, when the signal changes, begin making the next mother, where the garden you see from your window is connected to a dark room of wax, chemistry, hunger, memory, and eggs. The queen has never seen your flowers. She may never see sunlight again after her mating flights. She will not know the color of the lavender. She will not know the path between the hive and your fence. She will not hear the human voice above the garden. But the bees that move through all of that may have started inside her, one egg at a time, every 43 seconds in the crowded dark. So the next time a bee lands in your garden, the question is not whether she has a queen. She does. The question is, what kind of society can have a queen and still not be ruled by her? And once you understand that, the hive stops looking like a monarchy. It starts looking like something stranger, a future being made by a mother who does not command it, and daughters who will spend their short lives keeping that future alive. If you have ever assumed the queen bee was the boss of the hive, tell me when you first heard that idea. Was it as a child? From a nature show? From the word queen itself? I read every comment, and I want to know how many of us learned the same wrong story before we ever saw a hive. Subscribe for the next one. And the next time you see a bee in your garden, remember this: she came from a queen, but she did not come because a queen ordered her to.